June 6, 1944. D-Day. The greatest military operation in history. 150,000 soldiers land on Normandy beaches. But here's what few know. At that very moment, 200 kilometers from Normandy, Adolf Hitler kept an entire tank army in reserve. 15 divisions, 150,000 men, hundreds of tanks. They stood in the Calais area and waited for the real invasion. Because Hitler was certain. Normandy was a deception, a diversion. The main strike would come through the Pas-de-Calais Strait, the shortest route to Germany. And he waited. A week, 2 weeks, a month. While the Allies strengthened their foothold in Normandy, German tanks stood in Calais and did nothing. How did the Allies deceive the greatest military tyrant of the 20th century? Welcome to the story of Operation Fortitude. The greatest deception operation of all time. It all started with a simple idea. Create an army that doesn't exist. First United States Army Group, FUSAG. On paper, 8 divisions, 100,000 soldiers, thousands of tanks and trucks. In reality, nothing. Or rather, inflatable rubber tanks, plywood aircraft, and canvas stretched over pipe frames. The technology was borrowed from a man who invented it back in 1941 in North Africa. Lieutenant Colonel Dudley Clark created a unit codenamed a force that specialized in deceiving the enemy. Before the Battle of El Alamein, Clark's team convinced the Germans that Montgomery's strike would come from the south. They created fake tank tracks, built a mock fuel depot, diverted to armored divisions. When Montgomery struck from the north, the Germans were stunned. Now the same technology was applied in England, but on an unprecedented scale. Technicians from Shepperton Film Studios were hired to create hundreds of inflatable Sherman tanks. From a distance they looked absolutely real. They were lined up in huge parks in Kent and Sussex, where German intelligence was meant to see them. 250 fake landing craft were made from canvas, wood, and empty oil drums. They were launched along the southeast coast. From 10,000 meters altitude, they looked completely convincing. German reconnaissance aircraft photographed giant concentrations of ships, ready for invasion across the Pas-de-Calais. Near Dover, an entire fake oil depot was built. From wooden boards, scaffolding, and old sewer pipes from bomb sites. From the ground it looked pathetic, but from 20,000 feet, like the real thing. The Royal Air Force patrolled the sky above it. Workers burned smudge pots filled with crude oil on the ground, creating haze. When German guns from Cape Grisnez shelled the depot, the British used pyrotechnics simulating fires and damage. King George VI even visited this fake facility for inspection, and Dover's Lord Mayor publicly mentioned it as a potential municipal asset after the war. But a fake army needed a real commander, and the Allies chose the best, General George Patton, the most famous, most aggressive, most feared by Germans American commander. Patton, who preferred commanding real troops, was appointed commander-in-chief of a non-existent army, and he played his role brilliantly. Patton gave speeches to imaginary units, inspected inflatable tanks, participated in award ceremonies for fictional heroes. His presence in southeast England accidentally leaked to the Germans through diplomatic channels and double agents. For German intelligence, this was final proof. If Patton's there, that's where the main strike will be. But the most genius element of deception was radio traffic. An entire American signals unit was instructed to transmit fake messages, generating enough radio traffic to suggest a giant army gathering in southeast England. Special equipment created the illusion of twice as many radio sets as actually existed. Vans with radio transmitters traveled around southern England, simulating troop movements. German interceptors heard coordination between divisions, movement orders, supply delivery messages. All of it was completely fabricated, but sounded absolutely convincing. In reality, the US Third Army was in Cheshire, 150 miles from the supposed location. But even the most genius operation needed a man, who would deliver disinformation straight to Hitler's office. And that man was a Spaniard named Juan Pujol Garcia, code name Garbo, the greatest double agent of World War II. Garbo's story begins in 1940. This modest Spaniard, having survived the Civil War and come to hate fascism, decided to help Britain fight Nazism. He offered his services to British intelligence 3 times. 3 times he was rejected. They simply didn't believe him. Then Pujol did the incredible. He offered his services to the Germans, to then come to the British as a ready-made double agent. He created a fake identity as a fanatical pro-Nazi official, obtained a fake Spanish diplomatic passport by simply tricking a printer, that he worked for the embassy in Lisbon. The Germans believed him and ordered him to create a spy network in Britain. But Pujol didn't even go to Britain. He stayed in Lisbon and began inventing agents. Sitting in a Portuguese library with British guidebooks and maps, Pujol created an entire network of fictional subagents. A Swiss businessman in Glasgow, a Venezuelan student in London, an anti-British waiter in Coventry. 27 agents in total, none of whom existed. His reports were so convincing that MI5 began intercepting them, not understanding who this genius German agent in Britain was. In February 1942, US Navy Lieutenant Patrick de Morest finally understood Pujol's potential and contacted the British. On April 24, 1942, Pujol actually moved to the United Kingdom. He was given the code name Bovril after beef extract, and later, Garbo after Greta Garbo, for his acting talent. MI5 officer Tomas Harris, who spoke fluent Spanish, began working with him. By 1944, the Germans completely trusted Garbo. They considered him their best agent in Britain, and it was through him that British intelligence poured disinformation straight into Hitler's headquarters. Before D-Day, Garbo and his agents reported giant troop concentrations in southeast England, Patton's preparations, invasion plans through Pas-de-Calais. But Garbo's most genius move came after the Normandy landings. Early morning on June 9th, 3 days after D-Day, he sent the Germans an urgent report 3,000 words long. The gist: Normandy is a diversionary maneuver. The main invasion is yet to come, through Pas-de-Calais, by the 1st United States Army Group under Patton's command. The report was so convincing that Hitler personally ordered divisions kept in Calais. They remained there 4 weeks, while the Allies strengthened their foothold. Operation Fortitude worked perfectly, until mid-July, over a month after D-Day. Hitler kept 15 divisions in the Pas-de-Calais area, awaiting the real invasion. 150,000 soldiers, hundreds of tanks, thousands of guns stood idle while the Allies conquered France. Historians estimate, if these divisions had been thrown into Normandy in the first days after landing, the operation's outcome could have been completely different. The Allies hung by a thread. The beachhead was fragile, reserves insufficient. German tank divisions could have pushed them back into the sea, but they stood in Calais waiting for Patton with his Phantom Army. Garbo was so convincing that the Germans awarded him the Iron Cross, not knowing they were honoring the man who deceived them. The British awarded him the Order of the British Empire, the only person in World War II to receive highest honors from both warring sides. After the war, Garbo faked his death from malaria in Angola and disappeared. For 30 years the world thought him dead. Only in 1984 did writer Nigel West track him down in Venezuela, where he lived under a false name. In 1988, aged 76, Garbo returned to Britain as a hero. Prince Charles personally met with him. The man who deceived Hitler finally received the recognition he deserved. Operation Fortitude proved, sometimes deception is more effective than force. Inflatable tanks, plywood ships, fictional agents, and one genius Spaniard changed the war's course no less than tanks and aircraft. It was a triumph of imagination over reality, theater over war, mind over brute force. The Allies created an army from thin air and convinced the greatest tyrant of the 20th century. It was real, and he believed. Today, Fortitude's methods are studied in military academies worldwide. principles of psychological warfare, disinformation, use of double agents, all legacy of an operation that saved thousands of lives and hastened the war's end. Subscribe to learn more about secret operations that changed history. In the next episode, Project Venona. How the USA cracked Soviet ciphers and uncovered a spy network in their own government.